Hello and welcome to the Calumet Wilderness with Sam Love. I am your host, Sam Love. Well, I'm out here at Wampum Lake. This is a Cook County Forest Preserve. This is actually an old barrow pit, or I've heard people out here also call them burrow pits. This was dug to build the highways back there, 80, 94, 294, and then it was filled with water. You got a mile-long shoreline to fish here. Really nice looking, but I'm not here to look at holes in the ground. I'm actually here to look at two other things today. Thornton Creek, which is in the woods over that way, and I also want to explore the legacy of a fairly large Native American village that was here many centuries ago. So stick around, let's check it out. I left my notes in the car, so I've got to go back and get them. Pardon me. Well, before it was the highway, in fact, in the late 19th century, this was the property of a John Hoxie, who was a cattle baron. That's about all I want to say about him. The archaeological site was given his name, so that's the only reason why I mention that. Well, the highway was constructed in the early 50s, 1953. But before that happened, an archaeological excavation occurred of a major village that was probably occupied from maybe the 1000s up to contact time. A little chilly out today. If you're wondering what happened to the burgundy hat, I left it in my dad's car. So it will be making its return later in the week. I have a seat here. Got a beautiful, peaceful view of Thornton Creek. Airplanes up ahead. You think about where this is situated. You've got Thornton Creek. About a mile and a half to the north, you have the confluence with the little Calumet River. You've got Deer Creek. Not too far from here to the south. I mean, this would have been an absolutely rich area for the means of life. You've got these high duney areas, you've got wetlands, the creeks themselves. This would have been just teeming with life. A number of trails through here following the old shoreline. You've got the Sauk Trail to the south, trails along the Glenwood and Calumet shorelines. What we call the Vincent's Trace. That's not too far from here. So this was a significant area of life. If you could have gone back in time to, maybe the 12 or 1300s, you would have seen so many signs. This has been a very busy place. So what was found here? Well, I'm not going to go through the full list. It's actually quite long. I mean, you think if this was occupied for maybe half a millennium, it was a major site with a couple thousand people at its highest, there's a lot found. There's a great Wikipedia entry, very detailed, great links. So I'll put that in the description below. You can go dig into that if you're more interested. But pointing out some of the basics here, what was found here? Dice made of bone and antler, so evidence of gaming. Bone instruments, so evidence of music. Personal adornments, things like hair beads, pendants, bracelets. A number of pipes and charms, giving some evidence of spiritual life here. Cultivation. There's evidence of cultivation of maize. In fact, an analysis found that this was a type of maize that developed in the eastern part of this continent. So there's some evidence of a connection there. Also bone tools, farming tools, evidence of hunting, and then of course what archaeologists live for, pottery. Over 12,000 shards found here. And doing an analysis, it's found that a lot of these shards seem to match the earlier styles of this Huber and Fisher culture rather than what it developed into in its later periods. So that's why archaeologists think that this site was occupied for quite a long time. So the archaeologists have located this as part of the Huber, and it might be Huber, I don't actually know. Again, I'm not an archaeologist. I'll probably say both, in fact. But the Huber and Fisher ware traditions, which they locate within the upper Mississippian culture. As a historian, archaeological labels can be helpful in getting relative dating, but they can be very confusing because, well, A, we don't necessarily know what the connections between, say, the people who left this material culture behind and, other, quote, Mississippian tribes, like, for example, Cahokia down in Illinois or Astalon up in Wisconsin. We don't know the relationships. I always like to think of it this way. If, our cupboards could be preserved for the future and future archaeologists were digging around, what kind of foods would they find in there? In mine, they'd Mexican foods. What else? Italian-style foods, sauerkraut. They find a lot of Germanic foods. Without any written clues or any other indicators, it'd be, it might be kind of hard to tell or place us in a specific culture. So we have to keep that in mind. We don't know how these people identified themselves. Personally, I think it's highly likely that these are the ancestors of the Native Americans that were living here upon contact. Archaeology doesn't necessarily reveal that or answer that question. Genetics could, of course. 11 graves were found at this site, about half of which were found with some kind of grave goods. One included some dog bones, dogs were very important in ceremonial proceedings of many Midwestern Native American tribes. And then another, this is interesting, an otter skull with copper beads in the eyes. So what does that mean? Fascinating. But probably most interesting were the metal objects that were found here. Now, metalworking has a long history with the Native American tribes of the Great Lakes region. The Keweenaw Peninsula up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan has been known as a copper producing site for millennia. I think probably 5,000 years, probably more. So finding copper in area Native American sites is not unusual, but something very unusual, some very interesting metal objects were found here. So start with the indigenous ones, and I'm going to flash the Wikipedia line up on the screen here. So a fragment of a copper bead, 2 copper hair beads, 1 flat copper fragment, a serpent effigy, and an awl. And these are all believed to be of indigenous production. But these 2 other objects, 3 sheets of brass fragments and 2 small copper sheets, these were determined to be of European origin. Wow. So what does that mean? It's pretty interesting, right? Well, it means that there was some kind of presence of Europeans here earlier than what we traditionally think, right? We tend to think Marquette was probably the first European descended person to come through here in the 1670s. Well, this is likely before then. Now, does that mean there were Europeans here trading with the villagers? Not necessarily. These objects could have been obtained elsewhere and just ultimately found their way to here. But it certainly puts the beginning part of European presence here probably a lot earlier than what we would think it is. And for certain, it just makes this site such a conundrum in that, you've got the presence of European items, but then you've also got a preponderance of earlier pottery styles or earlier indigenous pottery styles. The site archaeologically was not stratified, so it's hard to come up with relative dating for anything, but archaeologists have speculated this site was inhabited for quite a long time. It's from the prehistoric period right into the historic period. What a great place to live, though, and very well situated out here. Can still get a sense of that beauty and even a bit of that peace despite the interstate being back there. Let's press on. This is an informal trail. I've not seen it marked on any map or app. And as I was back here earlier, I noticed it seemed like some nice forest preserve workers were kind of checking me out back here, seeing what I was doing. So I walked the furthest possible, widest possible path to not have to encounter them. So if they want to come up here and tell me not to be here, they're going to have to drive over. They left. So here I am. Albert Scharf's map, called the Chicagoland Indian Trails of 1804, is a really helpful source here. So this map has the contemporary communities. This map was made in 1900, 1901. So you see those, and then you can see all of the major Native American trails, village sites, many other things on here. So if we take a look at the Glenwood area, I guess the only downfall of this map is that it just has Illinois. It doesn't have anything from Indiana, but what it has for the Illinois side of the Calumet region is very useful, and I will do a separate video on this one day soon. But you can see he's got this area marked out. It's got it notified as a major village. And then he's also got markings where there were major chipping stations to produce projectile points, signal stations, and then mounds. In fact, if you look up here at the confluence of Thorn Creek and the Little Calumet River, and if you remember back to the video I made when I visited that on Dutch American Heritage Day, I talked about confluences being sacred places. Well, for the people living here, it certainly was. They located a burial mound right at that confluence. So similar to McGuinn's Village, this would have been a very well-connected site. All these different trails emanating in and out. And speaking of McGuinn's Village, that's only about 15 miles from here. So that's doable as a walk. What an adventure into space and time that would be, to go from one major site to another like that. One day. Well, once again, a big thank you to everybody who's clicked that like button, shared videos, left comments, and click that subscribe button. I really appreciate that. We've had quite a big jump over the past few weeks, so just inspires me to keep on going out here. So appreciate your landscape, and I'll see you in the next adventure in the Calumet Wilderness.